Hey there everyone, welcome back to the Dan Cave and welcome to part number 3 of the Fujimi 1/20th scale Lotus 97T. So it's part 3 and it's the final part. So all the work of the previous 2 parts comes together. A lot more work to be done in this part as well. And finally mash that all together into a final product. So yeah, I've really enjoyed this build. Really enjoyed this kit from Fujimi. And I hope it shows in the end result. So I'm not going to hang about. Yeah, straight on over and let's catch up with the footage and what's gone on in part 3. So over we go. So jumping into part 3, starting with creating some templates for the monocoque. So the monocoque on these cars was a carbon fiber monocoque. I don't have a carbon set for it, so I'm just going to create some templates using some masking tape to create some patterns for all the key components, which will give me a complete wrap for the carbon monocoque. So I'm going to use Scale Motorsport Carbon 1024, which is black and pewter. So I'm looking at the reference photos. The actual carbon fiber itself doesn't have a real kind of distinct pattern to it, like a lot of modern carbon fibers. And the closest that I found to date that I quite like is this from Scale Motorsport. So it's got a little bit of a pattern, but not too much that makes it look like a modern kind of carbon fiber wrap. So each of the pieces has been cut out using the masking tape templates, and then it's the usual decaling process. Warm water, a bit of hot air, and UMP decal solutions, just to work it in and get it to conform around all the kind of features and surface parts of this monocoque. So it's very, very responsive to UMP normal and UMP strong. Keep on applying heat, keep on applying the solutions. Make sure you work those bubbles out as well. And once that's done and given plenty of time to dry, we can add on some of the sponsor decals, which were of course visible on the monocoque when the body was lifted off. And these are included on the TB decal sheet as well. So that then can be set aside, and it's over to the spray booth and start spraying up some of the parts of the engine, some of the pipe work, the exhaust. Some of the pipe work and intake work is done in Alclad dark aluminium. Some of the hotter parts for the exhaust and turbo are done in pale burnt metal. And while I'm there, I'm going to paint the center of the wheels in pale gold. So all these parts have of course been primed previously in UMP black primer, and all the metallic work is done through a UMP Apex, which is just used for metallics. So one of the key tools that I've got is quite an expensive tool from D-Spay, is their circle cutter, but I'll be quite honest, it's an absolutely brilliant piece of kit for cutting out circles like this, for doing the center of the wheels, masking them off. It's absolutely brilliant. It's one of those tools you might not use it very often, but when you do, it earns its own value, to be honest. So with those circles cut from the masking tape, I'll pop them in the center, mask off the parts I want to remain gold. And once I'm happy with that, be back over to the spray booth and spray the remainder of the wheel rim in Alclad duraluminum. Once again, through the UMP Apex. So as you can see, that produces a nice shiny metallic finish, but not overly so. So they're set aside to dry. It's time to start work on some of the turbo intercooler exhaust parts. So there's a lot of small, fairly fiddly parts. At this stage, I'm currently working them into sub-assemblies. This was probably the wrong step. because I do end up with alignment and fit issues a bit later on, which I managed to bodge my way through, but it does cause me some problems at this stage. So currently I'm working on one of the intake intakes that goes behind the radiator. The pipework has a kind of have notches cut out of them, which suggests an orientation. But I'll be quite honest, they're a little bit off. I think it would have been better to leave all these parts separate. But however, I've glued them up in sub-assemblies, and I'll deal with the consequences of this a little bit later. But it's the one area of the kit that I think the fit wasn't brilliant on. It does have some knock-on effects as well, in that it makes the top panel of the bodywork not quite fit perfectly. But otherwise, it could well be kind of my fault for the assembly sequence I chose. But either way, as you can see, when dry fitting the exhaust do seem to fit. Radiator pipework seems to be in place. So when I go to assemble it, I'll run into the problems. So once those wheels have had some curing time, it's time to remove the masking tape. As you can see, they've come out absolutely lovely with the gold centers and polished, well, essentially a polished aluminium rim. So once that's complete, it's time to pop on to doing some of the interior work. A little bit of brush painting just to add some matte silk black from Revell, just to add a little bit of contrast to the UMP black primer that was used as the base coat. So an easy bit of work to do, a little bit of brush and a little bit of water just to help the paint flow a little bit better. So there's a few decals for the interior, as you can imagine, gauges, clocks, etc. So they are added, and then it's time to move on to the seat belts. So I'm going to use Tamiya seatbelt set. So there's not even decals in this kit for the seatbelts, but however, I would have replaced them anyway. But I'm going to use one of the Tamiya 120th sets. So here I am just picking out the various parts I need for the center kind of main buckle. So those parts get glued together with a little bit of CA glue and some very careful placement. Then the actual belt buckles themselves, easy enough to feed some 3mm ribbon. So I'm not using the tape that comes with the actual seatbelt set. I'm using my own ribbon because I think it actually looks better. But as you can see, just popping it through an appropriate point on the buckle, folding it over using some double-sided tape. And it's quite a high-tack double-sided tape, so they're not going to move. And as you can see, I tend to leave them a little bit over-length, and I'll trim them later when I'm installing them. So again, it's the same process for the end of the seatbelt buckle. And then there are a couple of actually stickers from the Tamiya set, which go straight down onto the seatbelt material. And then, of course, once they're all made up, they can be trimmed as necessary and added to the seat. The only issue I ever have with seat belts, well, aside from the ribbon sometimes, is actually laying them out, because sometimes you don't want them to look too uniform, but you don't want them to look too messy either. It's finding that right balance, which aesthetically can be challenging to do. So with that done, it's on to flattening back the 2K. So I'm using God Hand sanding sponges. I mainly use the 6, 8 and 10. I think because I've got a couple of dust spots, I'm actually starting with the 4. But as is always, plenty of water. Start with the coarsest grit and then work my way up through the finer grits. And that's worked all the way around all the body panels. just to knock down any high spots on the 2K, get rid of any dust spots, and just flatten it off a little bit. So plenty of water, dry it off every now and again, see how much it's progressing. And once that's done, it's on to the UMP polishing compounds, which is basically two parts: there's a compound and a polish. And that will bring back that absolutely perfect shine and luster to the 2K finish. So generally I like to get all the body panels done in the compound, get them all washed up to remove any excess or anything in any panel gaps or panel lines, and then move on to the actual polish as a second step. But it's pretty much the same process for each, getting a little bit of the compound or material onto the surface, using a lint-free cotton, I think polishing cloth in this case, working it in, getting that fine clear finish back, and then removing any excess once it all dries and hazes off. So once I'm of course happy with that polished finish, it's time to move on to assembling the wheels into their respective tyres. So these are wet tyres because of course the race this car represents was from a wet race. So the treaded tyres are actually correct in this case. And once the wheels are popped into the tyres, it's time to add the tyre decals. So these are basically a reverse decal. So you essentially have to remove the top, what would we call it? So it's kind of like greaseproof paper. But then essentially you need to remove another layer from the backing paper. And it's this layer that actually contains the reverse decal. As you can see, just shown. So try not to touch it because these decals are very delicate. Place it where I want it on the tyre. And then it's just a case of adding some water from a cotton bud that's been dipped in clean water. Just enough just to wet through the paper. Give it about 15-20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds at most. And then you can peel off the backing paper and you should have a perfectly good tyre decal added. That's then of course repeated for all four tyres inside and out. So once that's done, they can be set aside and then it's on to, well, basically final assembly. So we start by assembling the front wing. So there's kind of two major elements of the front wing. So you add the bigger, kind of more forward element first. You can add some of the wishbone elements as well, but then add the second part of the front wing assembly. Then you need to add in essentially the front nose pod sides, because they are kind of intermixed with the wishbone and kind of steering assembly for the front. And then the actual brake discs and wheel hubs can be added to the remainder of the wishbones. They're quite delicate, but the locating points are quite clear, if a little bit stiff to put together. So with that in place and the end plates of the front wing also added, it's time to try and get this exhaust turbo and intercooler assembly done. So as I said earlier, the alignment is not great when I try and do this assembly. It's essentially forced into place. And I will add a little bit of filler just to cover up some of the major gaps and touch up some of the paintwork. But in the meantime, the seat can be added to the monocoque. That can then be glued into the floor of the F1 car. There's a little bit of wiring added for some additional detail. Just because I know the top cover is going to sit off anyway, it just adds a little bit of visual representation of some of the wiring. The rear wing gets popped in place. kind of one major element that holds that in place. In the middle, all 4 wheels can then be added. And essentially there's a center nut, center bolt, which goes through each of the wheels. And just make sure you get those front wheels aligned. Although any alignment issues are more just because the plastic is quite flimsy, because it's very, very thin. So tinted windscreen can be added to the upper part of the bodywork. And then a little bit of PVA type glue. So in this case, I'm using glue and glaze from Deluxe Materials just to pop the mirrors in place. A little bit of a tight fit. They do squeeze in. Add the rear wet weather red light. And then pop the bodywork on top. And that is this Lotus 97 completed. So let's head on over and have a look at some final photos. So I will point out, because I know someone will mention it, the front tyres are the wrong way around. They are swapped on the shelf. I only noticed when I was tidying up the photographs that they were the wrong way around. But aside from that, overall, really happy with this kit. Very enjoyable build. And a very pleasant finish, even if I do say so myself. So let's head back to me for some final thoughts. So there we go. That's part 3 done and dusted. So that is the completed Fujimi 1/20th scale Lotus 97T, which of course was Senna's first race-winning car from 1986. So really enjoyable kit from Fujimi. A lot of delicate detail in there. A few shortcomings. Like, I'm surprised they didn't include any decals for the seatbelts, let alone a little bit of photo etch. That's a little bit of a surprise. But, generally, a lot of people add aftermarket seatbelts anyway, so decals are not great on F1 cars. So not a problem, as you saw in the video. I used one of the Tamiya sets for that purpose. So, aside from that, I think the few fit issues with the exhaust and turbos and just how the parts kind of orient, maybe it was my doing. Who knows? Either way, it meant that the kind of bodywork didn't quite fit snugly. But it's not a problem, because when it sits on the shelf, it generally will sit with the bodywork off anyway, because that displays the all that kind of carbon fiber work that was done on the monocoque, and the level of detail on the engine was quite good as well. So that's not a problem. Other than that, yeah, I think it's quite a good kit. I look forward to building another F1 kit from Fujimi. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed the build series as well. Hope you've enjoyed part 3. If you are new here, please subscribe to the channel, and for everyone watching, please give the video a like as well, and any comments, feel free to leave them down below in the comments field. So thank you all for watching. Thank you for sitting with me for 3 parts, but it's only an hour's footage for all 3 of them. Managing to condense these videos into what I hope is a little bit of value added, shows you the key parts of the build, and doesn't bore you to death either. So so thanks for watching, and I'll see you all very, very soon in another video. So that's it from me. So bye bye for now.